Text at Indeed. From Engineer to Leader, Finding Your Path. Panel discussion. David Tulig, Jeff Davis, Julie Scully, R.C. Johnson. Moderated by Jack Humphrey.
We'll start by introducing our guests here. I'm really excited to have them all here. And they've sat exactly in the order that I'm going to introduce them without any planning. What are the chances of that? So first up is R.C. Johnson. R.C. studied computer science at Missouri University of Science and Technology. Did I get that right? Yeah. And I got a bachelor's degree in CS there and went on, I think, to get a master's in information science and technology. And he's the only person on the panel of all 5 of us with a graduate degree. R.C. worked at National Instruments and then went on to Bazaarvoice for a number of years, where he started his career in management. He later became the engineering director for WP Engine and then LawnStarter before joining Indeed. He joined Indeed in our labs team, and he's been here 3 years. In his current role, he's the engineering director for Indeed Incubator, which is a really cool program that shepherds our kind of new product exploration using sort of an internal venture capital type model. He has teams of engineers in Austin, Seattle, and Tokyo. So please welcome R.C. Next up is Jeff Davis, who is the director of site reliability engineering at Indeed. Jeff studied computer engineering at UT Austin and worked for many years as a software engineer. Before Indeed was the VP of engineering for Quarry Technologies. He's been at Indeed for 4 years. He spent the first couple of years leading a set of teams that work on the job search front end and some related products. And then we invited him to take on the challenge of starting a site reliability engineering practice for Indeed. And in the last couple of years, he's grown that group, doubled it in size, established some really great best practices for reliability, and developed some amazing leaders in that group. He has SREs all over the world in his group, in Dublin, Tokyo, Hyderabad, San Francisco, Seattle, Austin. So please welcome Jeff to the stage. I'm going in order of tenure from newest to most tenured at Indeed.
Tulig.
Just by a few months.
Humphrey.
They're comparing notes, really? Is that true? So next up is Julie Scully, who studied computer science at Rice. She started her career as a software development engineer in test at Microsoft. Later went on to join Google, where she got shoved into management for the first time. She's been at Indeed, though, for 10 years, pretty much 10 years. And she started here working as an engineer on the job search back-end team, and later went on to become a manager for that team. She spent some time, about a year, in our Tokyo office. She's been an engineering director here for a couple of years. She's responsible for the product development for our small and medium-sized businesses, the employers in the small and medium-sized businesses, or SMB. And her teams are in Austin, Seattle, Tokyo, and Singapore. Welcome, Julie. And then finally, we have David Tulig, who studied computer science at UT Austin and has been at Indeed ever since for 10 years. Started out working on some employer-facing products, and then went on to work on employer and job seeker-facing products as part of the founding team that built Indeed Resume. In 2015, we asked David to launch our Indeed University program, which is our way of onboarding new college grads into Indeed. So David defined and led that program in its first year in 2015. It's run every successive year since then. For 4 years, it's graduated 227 new grads have come through it, And even better, it's created opportunities for about 50 people to try out leadership as a lead for the summer. It's a 3-month program, and that's been really powerful for us. David is the engineering director now for job seeker profiles and applications, meaning your resume on Indeed and how you apply to jobs using our Indeed Apply features. He's got teams in Austin, Seattle, Tokyo, Hyderabad, and San Francisco. Please welcome David. All right, I'm going to get into it with some topics and questions for these folks. I'm really happy to have them here. Thank you so much, panelists. Before I do that, though, I want to get a quick show of hands from the audience. Like, who here in the room is in an official leadership role of some kind, frontline manager all the way up through executive? How many?
They raise hands.
Okay, it looks like half or maybe a little more than half of the room. Who here is in what they would consider an unofficial leadership role? All right, that was maybe a third of the room. Great. Who here would like to do those things but isn't yet? All right, nice, and maybe another third. So keep that in mind, panelists. We're talking to people at all phases, all steps along the leadership journey. And so what we'll start out by talking about, I'm going to ask everyone to talk about how they kind of got onto this path. What inspired you to move into leadership, move into management for the first time? And we'll start with David as the most tenured panelist.
Toolig.
Yeah, so my path was pretty straightforward when it comes to an engineer moving into kind of leadership and management. I started off as a front-end developer working on our employer products, and then was given the opportunity to start a brand new set of products for resume. So job seekers creating the resume, and then resume search. And I think what I started to learn there was I really liked the business side in addition to the engineering. So I worked a lot with our product management team to come up with, okay, what should we launch? How should we do that? We also were growing the team, and I really enjoyed onboarding new hires, working with interns. And I started doing a lot of mentorship and coaching at that point. And I think that's about kind of what got me started on this. And from there, Jack, Doug, and others at Indeed kind of recognized that I really liked doing this and provided a lot of opportunities that kind of snowballed into the role I'm in today.
Humphrey.
Thanks, David. Julie, you want to share kind of how you got onto this path?
Scully.
Sure. So I think, is this working? I think it's somewhat similar to David. I had been a manager at Google for a short period of time before I left there, and I didn't really love it. I felt like it was basically still doing the technical leadership, which I really liked, but then it was also doing a lot of administrative stuff that I didn't like as much, and also at that time and the team that I was on was not necessarily particularly valued. It wasn't something that was reinforced or really trained to do especially well. It was just kind of a thing that you needed to do, but the main focus was still on that technical leadership and technical delivery. So when I came to Indeed, I wasn't that interested in being a manager. So early on, I had a couple of opportunities, and I said no for two reasons. One, I didn't think I wanted to do it. And second, I had started my career in QA. I had transitioned into complete SWE, not software engineering test. And so I still felt like I had a lot to learn before I could realistically lead others or manage other people. So what kind of changed that for me at Indeed, two things: as I had delivered more projects, I gained more confidence that I could do that work and could effectively support and grow other people in that same way. The other thing that actually made a big difference for me, one of my colleagues who had been here for a long time and was very technical along with me had asked me actually to do it and thought I would do a good job at it. And he had been very hands-on, very technical as well. And so one of my biggest concerns was, well, why would you do this? Why would I switch from doing what I'm doing today? And so because this person who I respected and knew was very technical, he was able to explain to me how you can still absolutely be helping solve technical problems, how you can solve many more technical problems by working through a team and supporting other people to solve technical problems than you could on your own, how you get to work at a larger scale and you get to solve bigger problems. He convinced me of all the upside of working through others and working across a larger scope of people on bigger problems than you could ever solve individually. So that kind of convinced me to, partially his confidence that I would be good at it, and then secondly, the discussion about what it actually made up and how you could stay technical and how you could still be involved in technical decisions made me want to try it at Indeed.
Humphrey.
And has his pitch for all the things that were going to be great about it held true for you?
Scully.
Sure. I mean, for the most part, I think that is definitely true. Certainly when you're managing one individual team, you're very hands-on. You're still deeply involved in the technical stuff. As with probably a lot of people, the first team I managed was also the team I had been the technical leader of for some time. So it really didn't change that much in the beginning. I think as my scope has changed and as the teams I'm working with has changed, it remains true, but in ways that wouldn't have made sense to me at the time, to be honest. Your level of engagement changes over time.
Humphrey.
Right. And you mentioned that when you were in that first management role at a previous company, you didn't feel like it was particularly supported or appreciated. Was that experience different doing it here?
Scully.
Yes, and I mean, to be clear, my experience was that it wasn't necessarily super supported at the time. This was a while back, and things could have changed. I think at Indeed, we strongly valued that aspect of coaching and investing in people and doing it well. We put a lot of thought into how to help people understand how to grow, how to create those opportunities. So I think when I was first a manager, I'll be honest, I don't think I actually recognized the value in that. It was more kind of going through the motions of evaluations and learning how to do it. But as I got more experience, I got more understanding of the nuance and the art and the craft of actually coaching and growing another person, and learn to love that as much or more as delivering a technical solution. So I think Indeed created that, as well as you grow into the role, you create it for yourself.
Humphrey.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. Jeff, what put you on the path to leadership?
Davis.
Well, as a software engineer, I noticed that I had strong urges to try to help other people solve problems, other engineers around me, try to help the whole team execute more effectively, try to help connect the dots with business motivations for engineering initiatives, both helping engineers understand those motivations and connect them to their work, but also trying to participate in the conversation about business priorities. And then I think I had seen a couple of strong examples of engineering managers doing those things, and I kind of connected the dots that that might become more of a full-time job someday. So then I had to go get a competing job offer for a manager role somewhere else, and then got offered a job as manager at my current company.
Humphrey.
Nice. That's not a tactic that you'd shared before. That's a good
Davis.
one. That's a good one.
Actually wasn't deliberate, but it worked.
Humphrey.
I see. RC, what about you?
Johnson.
Yeah, so for me, I had started my career, as Jack mentioned, National Instruments, then moved to a startup after a few years, and after a couple of years of developing there at the startup, had gotten into a senior role and was kind of figuring that out, and got the opportunity to kind of lead projects from the senior SWE role for a while, and then moved into a player coach role where I was kind of coaching the team and responsible for what the team delivered, but not necessarily HR responsible, not having to do reviews for a bit. And then a couple quarters later, moved into a space where I had a very small team and was managing them. And the thing that prompted me kind of all along the way was recognizing that the amount that I could contribute as one mediocre SWE was okay. I could get a fair amount done in a quarter, but if I could rally a team of people, whether it was the two engineers that I was working with at the time or later, more large teams, that we collectively could accomplish so much more than I could possibly do on my own, and we could break it apart and do it quickly and do it well. And there were way better software engineers, and I really enjoyed I think it was maybe Jack's point, like helping them grow and succeed and see new opportunities, new skills they could learn, or new ways to develop their skills. And so kind of just continued on that path. And like any good startup story, it went from 2 to 12 and 3 teams in a quick hurry.
Humphrey.
Great. I'd love to, RC, I'd love to hear your perspective on some of these verbs that we use and what they mean. Like we talk about leading, and I've tried to keep it general and talk about leadership, but we kind of get into it, like in how people start down the management track. And so what is managing and what is coaching? How do you think about how those things relate to each other, leading, coaching, and managing?
Johnson.
Sure. Yeah. So for me, management is just the title. I think what really matters first and foremost is the coaching. That's, for me, coaching is coming alongside the person and figuring out how to help them grow individually, or how to help them be successful on the project they're working on. Looking at what the opportunities are in that for it to be done better. I really liked the way Jack you put it in terms of asking those questions that get them there. And so that's that coach role, and it really, I like that. I like the use of that word. It really, uses that symbolism of a team on the field, and the coach is on the sidelines. They're not the ones moving the ball down the field. They're not. They may be calling some of the plays, but once the play goes into action, the coach is silent. He can't get word into the team often, and so the team kind of has to react, and they have to go through the conditioning that maybe the coach has put them through. And like, there's so much great symbolism there. And management is the effect that comes from good coaching. It's that we are managing this team down this direction, but we want the team to have a lot of voice in how they get there. And then leading is ultimately, something that's given to you by the individuals on your team. It's that they trust you to say where we should go, what are the goals, what's the vision for what this team or this group can accomplish. And that would be my set of definitions, but maybe others have different ones.
Humphrey.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that opportunity to start coaching people before you're in some kind of official role that you talked about having it's great, and I think a good way for people to see if that they want to proceed down a path of leading teams, leading projects. I want to come back later to kind of the decision to move kind of onto a manager track and how people might feel positive or negative about that. But for now, like, I want to bring it back around to that self-understanding aspect that I was talking about in the intro of that I think that I'm arguing that to be a good leader, you've got to understand yourself and kind of what your inclinations are, what your motivations are. And I'd love to hear from Jeff. Why don't you start us out? Tell us about kind of what techniques you've used to understand yourself as a leader.
Davis.
Yeah, so I think that I've always had a steady undercurrent of self-doubt that drives a fair bit of reflection and introspection. And those turn out to be really healthy when you're trying to grow through a bunch of different phases of a career path. Have this kind of never-ending urge to reflect and to introspect and to look for opportunities to improve, and to try to be really honest with yourself about things that you do well and things that you're not really doing very well yet.
Humphrey.
Do you find you have to make time for that introspection, or does it just happen naturally?
Davis.
Yeah, I can't turn it off. I'm sure that setting aside time could be beneficial in some cases.
Scully.
I'll say as well, so I agree. I think I spend a fair amount of time looking for ways to do things better. To Jack's point in the talk as well, for a while I was working with an outside coach, and I found that really helpful because in talking through with that person things I was experiencing or challenges that I had coming up, I can identify my own patterns. Maybe this speaks to the what is true and what are the stories that you tell yourself. But having this sort of independent third party reflecting back to me the things that they were hearing or asking questions to kind of lead me down a path, I feel like I learned a lot about not just sort of my traits, but then also ways, strategies for dealing with them or being more effective in situations that I had. So I found talking through and thinking through those things with another person made it that much more effective.
Humphrey.
Yeah, it's really hard to be objective about yourself, right? And to do that questioning thing that you can do with other people, to turn that on yourself is super hard. So I think that's really powerful.
Scully.
And you don't know what you don't know, right? So I find like I'll recognize some patterns, but then sometimes just like you might, when someone else is talking, you can identify a pattern in them. You might not see it yourself. So that also, they draw out the patterns that you can't recognize yourself.
Humphrey.
RC, how have you kind of gone about this kind of introspection?
Johnson.
Yeah, so I definitely suffered from the self-doubt as well, so just want to put that out there, name it. I'm not as good as reflection, and I've never used an outside coach, although I have been tempted to. The thing I have used is a number of different personality tests. I find that they are helpful in helping me to understand myself. So, for example, while at a startup a few years ago, all the management team took the Myers-Briggs test and was given that by a very qualified leader who then walked us through those results to help understand what those letters meant, and also like where on the continuum for each of those we sat. So I tend towards introversion, but not that much, not on the stronger side. I actually have some extroverted capabilities and characteristics. And so that was good for me to learn about myself, but it also was incredibly useful as a manager to understand those dimensions and to be able to begin to sense where my team or my peers even your manager is also useful. Just don't tell them necessarily. But where they are on some of those dimensions. Are they more of a thinker or are they more of a feeler? Are they more judging or are they more sensing? And like whether you think these are the right ways to judge people or not, having those thoughts and thinking, I know this person, they're going to come with more data, and that's good. That works well for me. And this person's going to come more with feelings, and actually that's really good for me because that balances me out. It helps in reading your team and kind of filling in some of the blind spots that I have. I've used that to have team members that I go to when I'm like, I don't know how the team responded to that message, and I will go to that person to get some sense, not just from the team, but from them of how the room felt at that time. So that's been a useful tool for me.
Humphrey.
Have you encountered much kind of pushback on kind of people not liking to be labeled by personality tests?
Johnson.
Yeah, I think you can get overly simplistic with them if you think, oh, well, he's an ISTJ and he's always going to respond in that way. There's people move, people change. I know that maybe Myers-Briggs claims that people don't change their Myers-Briggs that much. I don't actually put that much weight in it. I think for me, the benefit was kind of giving me a framework to try and simplify some things down, because dealing with people, there are a lot of very nuanced challenges, and it's really useful to have some way of kind of framing things so that you can kind of approach different problems. And so I try not to get overly prescriptive with it, and I try not to let my teams get overly prescriptive with it. I had team members who just actively did not want to do those, and we don't force it.
Humphrey.
Yeah, I think that we use one called Insights, I think it's called, here at Indeed, and we have in the past, and I think that it is valuable as a tool for introspection and a tool for thinking about how you interact with other people. Less useful in terms of like the label, although some people put it in their email signature, which I find interesting. I'm always like, well, you really want me to know that about you. David, I want to shift gears and talk about with everyone about decision points, and I wonder if you would share what you think was maybe a key decision in your career that really affected the direction of what you've done, and tell us about kind of how that impacted what how you've progressed.
Toolig.
So I think next to like choosing to start managing on a product and then managing a team, the opportunity to do Indeed University and do all of our new college hire onboarding was a big one for me. It forced a few things. One is I had to step away from coding, which I wasn't quite sure that was what I would want to do. I got into engineering because I like solving problems and I like writing code. So leading this program, at first it was 50 new grads with 12 leads. And so it gave me a chance to kind of see, okay, what would that be like where I'm not really working on a technical problem anymore, but more of an organizational problem and kind of helping build this program from scratch. So I think that was probably one of the bigger things, is it let me know that, okay, this is actually something I'm okay going down this path and kind of continuing, not being as technical or as close to code, I guess is a better way of putting it, than I used to be, and focusing entirely on the people and on the organization.
Humphrey.
I love those kinds of decision points where something is temporary, right? Like you can choose to go do something for a little while and know that if you absolutely hate it, you can come back to the thing you were doing before. And so those jump on those opportunities, right? Like where it's like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this, but it might be interesting.
Toolig.
Yeah, and I think that's been a big thing for like all the participant or all the leads. That's exactly the opportunity that they get, is we actually chose them because they thought they wanted to do management, and we wanted to give them a chance to see, okay, do they actually like doing this? And some folks continued with management after that. They're like, yes, actually, I really like this coaching aspect. I like leading and growing a team. Others did say, you know what, no, not right now. I don't want to do this at this point in time, and went back to kind of being a tech lead and still being a lead with a lot of stuff they learned, but deciding not to go down the coach path immediately.
Humphrey.
Right. Definitely have seen both outcomes. Julie, what about you? What was a key decision point for you?
Scully.
So Jack mentioned in my intro, I had an opportunity to go work out of our Tokyo office. I think that was really the changing point for me when I went from being kind of a direct team manager to having to step back a little bit further. So I went to Tokyo. I was going to spend a year. It was also a little bit temporary. I was going there. The office was newer. We wanted to help onboard and spin up and ramp up that office for Indeed. I think there were 3 reasons, looking back on it, I feel like that changed my trajectory. One, that was the first time that I was managing teams that I was not the technical expert for. So I had to learn, kind of like stepping away from the code. That was when I first had to learn how to work through others. You know, trust your tech lead, empower your team, ask questions and help guide them, but not be the person who knows the answer or who knows the line of code that needs to be changed. That was a new set of skills that I had to learn. A second thing that was actually really interesting about that is that I went there, I didn't see myself as a senior manager or as an experienced manager, but everyone there did. So oftentimes I'd notice in the room, you know, the managers in Tokyo would look to me and I'd kind of look around for the person behind me that had more experience. So kind of recognizing that I had advanced in my career and the way other people saw me was different than the way I saw myself. That really helped me. I find, for me personally, I don't know if others feel the same way, my self-perception tends to trail others' perception of me. And so that was the first time I really saw that firsthand, that other people saw me as far more experienced and of a stronger leader than I saw myself. And then I think the third thing, which was part of that as well, is up until then, my support system around me in Austin was there. So I had this pattern that I didn't recognize at the time, which is I'd have an idea and I'd kind of check it with someone before I did something about it. And all of a sudden, when you're 16 hours away and no one's going to answer you for a while anyways, I had to learn how to feel confident and just act, trust myself, make decisions, let people know what I was doing, but not wait for someone else to sort of validate my idea. So I think that really, those 3 things combined really helped me understand how to sort of lead at the next level. I feel like that really set up the rest of my trajectory to this point.
Humphrey.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What did you think you were going to get out of going to Tokyo? I'm curious.
Scully.
Well, I love to travel, and I thought it would be fun. My kids, you know what it was? So my kids were in 4th and 5th grade at the time, and the school I was going to have my kids in was an international school, but they do, I don't know if this helps the leadership that we're talking about, but there's this picture of this 5-year-old like in stance in front of a sumo wrestler. And I wanted to get a picture like that. So I just kind of like adventure and experience. I wanted to do something different. I thought it would be fun.
Humphrey.
That's the first time I've heard that story. I like that.
Scully.
I like
I
that.
have that picture.
Humphrey.
Of course you do. Like you had a whole year to get it. It would be so disappointing if you didn't. Jeff, what about you? What was a key decision point in your career?
Davis.
So this is going to sound like a recruiting pitch, but I had been working for startups for about 10 years before I came to Indeed, and I really thought of myself as a startup guy, not a medium-sized company guy. So the decision to come to Indeed was not one that I made easily, but it did throw me into a whole new set of opportunities that were totally different and really stretched me as a leader. I had always been, one of the most experienced engineers in the area where I was managing teams before. So it was easier to be, technically confident and helping guide decisions, and you could kind of help everybody line things up. Coming into a brand new company with a big existing ecosystem of products that I had no clue about, big group of engineers that I didn't really know, business that I didn't understand very well. That was a big challenge. And then the growth that Indeed has had over the last 4 years means that new opportunities are sort of popping up all the time. So there's been, lots of opportunities to
Humphrey,
stretch.
Like, hey, would you like to run our SRE group? That kind of thing.
Davis,
Like that,
Yeah,
yeah. And then I think more generally, I have this tendency to seek out things that seem really difficult, but also potentially impactful. And I think that, for better or for worse, has guided me into lots of opportunities to stretch myself as an engineer, as a manager, and as a person. Yeah.
Humphrey,
Taking a chance on the things that where you might fail. That's an important part. Yeah. RC, what about you?
Johnson,
Yeah, that actually reminds me of some advice that I got from a manager once, which was bet on you. If you are placing a bet on yourself. And I did this actually very early on in my management career. I'd been managing for about a year at a startup, and it was growing. They wanted to triple the engineering team. They wanted to add an engineering team in New York and London, and I thought, wow, that would be really fun. I'm sure they don't want this brand new manager. We've got some more experienced managers they could send. But I've been with the startup for 4 years now. I'll put my hat in the ring. And I put my hat in the ring, didn't hear anything. Thought, oh, they probably selected somebody else. No big deal. And then my manager left, and I still hadn't heard anything. And I thought, well, that's weird that I didn't at least hear, no, you're not selected. So I went at one of my skip levels to my boss's boss. And I said, hey, I think the time's coming up soon for that program to get started in New York and London. Did you find the people that you wanted to go on that? I was interested. And he said, I didn't know you were interested. I said, oh, well, yeah, I am. And he said, you'd be perfect. Oh, I've only been here a year, or managing for a year. Are you sure? He said, yeah, because you've been with the company longer. You understand more of the history of the company. And we want to take a product and we want to move it there. And you built that product. You were the tech lead, and you still own that team. Why don't you consider going? And so I went home and talked to my wife, who was 6 months pregnant at the time. And she surprisingly said yes. So we went back and said, yeah, we'll do this. And so at 7 months pregnant, with our third child, mind you, not just one, we moved to New York City and took the chance to start something from scratch. And I think, the other thing that I went into this thinking and turned out to be very true is that establishing a culture matters so much. And so while they could have sent someone who had more years of management experience, I understood that company's culture because I had been there as the 9th engineer working my way up. And so I was able to establish that office to be one that was successful and rapidly grew a new product into a new space that kind of pushed the company in an additional direction beyond what it was doing. And then that then shaped me into somebody who came back to Austin and had success at a number of different startups here in town, and then ended up at Indeed. Now I have 12 startups, and that's kind of my game, and I really love it. So it's been fun.
Humphrey,
Awesome. So there's a bit of a theme in this panel of take a jump into something different and challenging. Maybe move to New York or Tokyo, or in the process. Or David didn't tell this story, but he later went and spent a year and a half in our Seattle office. So I think that if you want to take a risk on going to a new place, it might pay off. Jeff, were you signaling that you wanted to add something there, or? Just is your mic dying?
Davis,
No, I was trying to do sign language for It Feels Hot Up Here.
Humphrey,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's super hot. So one of the things that I wanted to follow up on is David talked about that first time that he got away from the hands-on coding, and Julie talked about going to Tokyo, where she was, she had to lead even though she wasn't the domain expert in the code of the teams that she was leading. And this is kind of a common theme as people progress as technical leaders, is you get further away from the actual hands-on work. And I wanted to hear from any viewpoints from you all about how you stay technical. How do you manage to stay hands-on, even though you've kind of removed yourself from the daily delivery of code? Who wants to field that? Julie?
Scully,
I'll go. I think, so a few things. So one, I don't like to do code outside of work. So I know a lot of people talk about side projects or attending meetups and doing things like this. When I'm not working, I tend to like to be with my friends or my kids or garden or do other things. So I try to stay technical in my day-to-day work. I find that I still am involved in the projects that my teams are doing. I have an annoying habit of wanting to ask questions and genuinely understand what's going on, so I will ask questions until I understand. I don't do that on every project, but I try to pick some that are interesting. The thing that's amazing, I think, about working in tech is we're constantly getting new people in. Lots of people stay current, and we get new college grads or people from other companies. So I'm surrounded by people who know things and have experience with technologies that I don't have. And you talk about getting to know people and having conversations with people. I find it's fairly, I won't say it's easy, but there's a lot of opportunities in my normal job in one-on-ones and helping people and asking questions about projects to feel like I'm keeping up with the things that are doing and occasionally digging into one.
Humphrey,
Great. RC or Jeff, you have anything you want to add on staying technical?
Davis,
Yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities as a manager to help people in trying to help people solve problems, digging into areas that you're not familiar yet, but learning as you go, and kind of navigating to some kernel of a solution there. And then I do sometimes try to do side projects, although it's been a few years since I've had a real one going. To the extent that you can find time, that can be a way to actually write code.
Johnson,
So I'll just be honest. I don't try and stay current. I don't think that's really realistic as a manager. I try and stay relevant, of course. My trick is carving out some amount of time. It typically happens around a couple of times of the year, around the hackathon that Indeed runs twice a year. The other one that I actually didn't mention when we were kind of thinking through these questions, often the holiday breaks are also another good chance for me to get something done, just because work is quiet, things are kind of calm, maybe traveling with the family, and I've got some nights, and grandmas and grandpas have got the kids, and so I've just got some time, and but it doesn't happen as a side project kind of around the year. For me, the bulk of it is that hackathon, and the benefit for the hackathon is twofold. One, I encourage my teams, of course they're innovation teams, but even the other teams that I interact with, to really take advantage of that and use that. It's a great benefit that we have as an organization, and they should take advantage of it. And so by participating, making sure to carve the time out and participate, I'm trying to lead by example. I'm trying to show my team that I can make the time. You should make the time and do this. And then two, it is the other benefit is that it does work for me, that I can end up building some small tool that makes my job or someone else's job a little bit easier, and then kind of eke out a little bit of support on that for the next 6 months, and apologize a lot more than support, but that's my role.
Humphrey,
Yeah, I relate to that because I love our hackathons, and I often scratch the itch to write code during our hackathons too, and end up solving little problems that help a few people around the company, and then a few people has turned into 20 and 40, and suddenly I'm the only person supporting some tool that somehow we need, and that's a bad experience for everyone. when it's like, who knows about this thing? And somebody's like, oh, ask Jack. And they're like, ask what? Do what now? Yeah, so I still try to. Now I'm a little more scared to start the new things and getting better at handing off the old things. I want to sort of talk about two topics now. What are some things that you think are wisdom you try to impart to up and coming leaders? Things you wish you knew earlier in your career, maybe, or things that you think are just really important for people who are moving into leadership roles to think about. David, what comes to mind for you?
Toolig.
I guess kind of based off our previous conversation, I do think there's actually a lot of value in staying technical and maybe like holding off on jumping directly into management while kind of picking up that technical foundation and technical base. I've kind of seen through a couple different roles and teams that being able to still provide technical guidance, being able to bounce ideas, like having the team bounce ideas off me, especially when there isn't another tech lead available, is extremely valuable. And I think a lot of teams have given feedback that they've really appreciated, like having a technical manager that can kind of walk them through kind of the problems that they're seeing, even if I don't know the exact answers anymore. So that's one thing I try to tell folks if they're thinking about it is you don't necessarily have to rush into it. Stay technical, like really dig in and get that base built before you jump into it and you start taking steps away, because it does get a lot harder. I try to stay current with design reviews. I love coding, so I code on the weekends, but it's tough to entirely keep up with everything that's going on nowadays.
Humphrey.
And that kind of, I think, resonates with like maybe getting into putting your foot into leadership in a player coach role, or taking like a small detour over to be like a lead in IU that you know you can come back from if you really don't want it, to do that kind of thing. Julie, what advice do you like to give to people who are embarking on this?
Scully.
I don't know if it's necessarily advice I regularly give, but something that in any role change or any transition you go through, I think one thing I try and encourage people to think about is don't try to add value immediately. Like I think when you're an IC or you're writing code, you know what that looks like. You're writing tickets. There's very real artifacts of your work. As you move into more leadership, and then as you change roles within leadership, the artifacts are a lot more vague, right? You're working through other people, you're coaching through meetings, et cetera. And so I feel like it takes time to understand what it means to add value in those roles. And so I often will get somebody who's either new on management or new to Indeed, and they're trying to like make changes and do things, and they haven't actually taken the time yet to really even understand the team or to understand the role and how they can best be supportive and guide that team. And so I think my advice, which sometimes is strange, especially when new managers join Indeed, but don't rush to add value. First, understand, make sure you know what's going on, and kind of think about how you can support and guide the team, and not immediately jump to kind of the way you worked before or something that worked on a different team or at a different level.
Humphrey.
What sort of kind of negative outcomes do you associate with trying to add value too early? Like what have you seen go wrong because of that?
Scully.
I mean, I think a couple things. So one, as a leader, the most important thing, I think RC mentioned it earlier, the being a leader is designated to you by the people on your teams who trust you and want to believe in what you're saying and feel like you're helping them. So if you come in and are trying to change things up or fix this problem or do this thing that you see, I think you haven't given yourself a chance to really earn that trust and that respect of the team. But more than that, I think every team and every role is different. And so you need to approach it with understanding what that team actually needs from you. If I'm on a team that has a strong tech lead, I need to make sure and create a lot of space for that. And it maybe instead help make sure we've got the right product direction or things like that. Versus if I'm on a team that is very junior, they may actually need a lot of hands-on coaching from me. So I feel like taking that time to, one, understand the role and understand the team and how you can help that team be successful is, one, making sure you're going to focus in the right areas, and then giving you that time to earn the respect and the trust of the team.
Humphrey.
How much time do you think is ideal to gain that kind of context? Do you have any recommendations you give people?
Scully.
I mean, it really depends. To be honest, like I've got a team right now that was in such bad leadership need that like that person, boy, on day one, I need them doing things. So I think it could be anywhere from a few hours, but to You gotta be fast. But I mean, I think realistically, like a few weeks. I think anytime you're in a new role, I think it takes 3 to 6 months to be good at it and know what you're doing and feel good about it. Somewhere in there, I think you will organically start adding value. So I guess really what I try to get away from is people like looking for ways to be valuable, and instead listen, engage, communicate, and what you'll find is you're naturally adding that value as you're earning the trust.
Humphrey.
That makes a lot of sense. RC, what advice do you give to up-and-coming leaders?
Johnson.
The piece of advice that was given to me, and I've repeated it to a lot of folks, is especially for engineers, like we're so used to the code, and a bug in the code is either, the code is either right or it's wrong. And in people situations, it's never that simple. It is always, it's not black and white. It is a million different shades of gray. And there are different perspectives that you need to take into account. There are different, contexts of how does this person going to respond if I say this? The other person could totally respond just fine, but this person may receive that as an attack and may shut down, or they may, turn around and become, forceful and angry and yell and scream. So how you handle each person, each team, each situation, because it changes from situation to situation. Like you could handle the same person the same way, but in a different situation, and it totally blows up on you. So I think the thing, the phrase that was used for me was that black and white phrase, but I think the thing I've learned is to never trust my instincts and think that I can guess how people are going to respond, but instead come in slowly. I used this actually in Crucial Conversations training the other day, and I got this from a parenting book actually. Rather than going into something where I know there's going to be conflict and creating a head-on collision, that instead, if I know there's a chance that this is going to be a potential for conflict, that I'm going for a sideswipe. I'm trying to do the least amount of damage as possible, but one in which we come together and we see what's going on, and we can then course correct together. And so, there's lots of tricks to be learned in terms of dealing with people, but the first is just not expecting it to be black and white or completely logical.
Humphrey.
Yeah, when this group was talking earlier, Julie made a comment about how people are harder than the technology, and I thought, well, that's not always true, right? Both can be hard, but maybe it's true that for the CS geeks in the room, that maybe people are kind of MP complete in terms of like being able to solve them, right? Jeff, anything you want to add in terms of advice you like to give?
Davis.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value for a manager or an IC leader in being willing to ask the dumb question in a group setting, being willing to say, I don't know, show that you're lacking knowledge, because it gives less experienced engineers permission to do the same thing. And the body of knowledge that we have to interact with is way bigger than any of us can fit in our heads over time. So just establishing that culture of being comfortable saying, I don't know, or asking a question that you feel like probably I should know the answer to that, I feel like that can help create the right culture in a team.
Humphrey.
Yeah, I love that advice. That really resonates with me. I wanted to start thinking about questions that you have. I'm going to open it up to audience questions in a moment. We'll have a microphone we can bring to you. I wanted to kind of expand on this advice because I think that a lot of people early in their career, where people are kind of maybe people are nudging them towards leadership and nudging them towards a management track, and they're thinking, I'm not sure I want to go down that track. Like, I think I might like to just be an individual contributor my entire career. And we want to support, indeed we want to support people who want to go down that track. But I saw a tweet thread the other day from Matt Klein, at Matt Klein 123, Klein with a K-L-E-I-N. He's a Lyft engineer, and he wrote this really great tweet thread, and he was talking about growing your career as an IC. I highly recommend you go look it up. But I wrote down some quotes from it. He says, "You grow your career and influence. You. This means constantly advocating for ways to grow. Subjects to learn, projects with increased scope, and sometimes new teams or companies." And he goes on to talk about how you can kind of go down a breadth path of going wide and having a lot of influence on the technical direction of the company, or you can do what he did and go deep and become an expert in your field in some kind of specialization. And I think that what really resonated with me was the kind of like, nobody is going to do this for you in terms of growing your career, and that's true whether you're on the management track or the IC track, but you've really got to advocate for yourself. And I'm wondering kind of how does that, given that we would encourage people to advocate for themselves, like how else would we help people think about this choice of like, is this going to be the only way I have to grow my career? Can I do what Matt Klan says I can do? Or should I, what are the differences between doing that and trying to advocate for myself and being supported by you managers who know how to do the manager track clearly because you're on it? Any thoughts that anyone wants to share about that?
Scully.
So Jack told me last week that as you get more senior, like when you're more junior, others empower you, and when you're more senior, you empower yourself. I think that's true whether you're an IC or a manager. So I think that I've had ICs that want to stay ICs. The way I tend to look at it, it's kind of a continuum. So I have technical leaders who don't want to be people managers, but they love leading people, they love helping others, they love breaking down tickets and helping other people deliver. I've got people who really don't want to talk to others and want to keep, be heads down and just write code. And then, management is team leadership, and then also doing stuff like giving the hard feedback and having to kind of engage with difficult situations where there's not obvious answers. So I feel like it's really not black and white, I guess is what I'm thinking. I feel like there's a continuum, and it depends on what gives you energy and what you love, and how much you like engaging with people and how much you like growing people. The other thing I think is really important is you can switch.
Humphrey.
So
Scully.
you can go
Absolutely,
back
yeah.
and be an IC for you can try being a manager, you can go the other way. But I think that quote, I guess, really resonates with me in that it really is up to you. Like your manager or your coach is there to help you and support you as much as they can. But if you don't help them understand what you need, or you don't find ways for yourself to get it if you have a coach that's not helping you, it really is up to you at the end of the day, I think, to try things out and empower yourself.
Johnson.
So I think I mentioned earlier, I'm a models guy, and the model that I recently actually was shared by Doug, our SVP of engineering, to me, is this model of your career path where you move from a dependent developer where you need the support of other engineers to make code moved into production, to an independent developer where you're able to affect change on your own, to leading where you are shaping the direction that product is going, and then vision, where you're actually deciding what direction it should go, and you probably are operating at some level across all of those simultaneously. And I think that's true whether you're a manager or not. Now, it depends on the size of the organization, whether or not they would let you be visionary as an individual contributor, and that's kind of each person's choice. But I think that's a really natural progression to think about and think about where you are on that. And the other thing that I encourage engineers with is, and I love the point about being able to move back and forth, is that some of the best engineers I've ever managed were actually at one point in time a manager themselves. They came into the role, they tried it for some period of time, whether it was player coach or they had full management responsibilities, and they understand the role. They are much more empathetic of what the challenges are that I face. They're much more communicative of the things that I need to know as their manager. And so if you want to get better as an engineer, to be honest with you, take a stint if you get a chance and be a manager for a bit. Even if you're not sure you want to do it long term, try it, learn what it means, learn what you would do as a manager. If you don't stay there, it's okay. It will make you a better engineer.
Humphrey.
Yeah, this doing the zigzag, I think, back and forth is something that I'm hearing about more and more. It's in that meme is in the air of like, be a manager, then don't, then do it again, then go back and forth. And that kind of answers the earlier question a little bit of like, how do you stay technical? Like, how can you stay current? If you do that, it might make your career not look like, a progression upwards necessarily, but you do that enough and probably you'll get tapped for some pretty senior opportunities down the line. My team. So we're gonna wrap up now. I know probably everybody's tired of sitting and would like to get up and stretch and maybe have another drink. As a closing, I want to ask everyone to share kind of a closing thought, maybe a quote or a piece of wisdom that they think they want to have put out into the world. And you can feel free to pass if you want to, but we'll just go down the line. Go ahead, David.
Toolig.
I'm not sure I have a piece of wisdom. I guess, well, your talk earlier was about books, or now you don't read books. Well, I guess you did read books in the end. But I guess the book I read recently, actually Jeff recommended it about a year ago, was The Manager's Path. And I think you referenced this in your talk as well. I found that really helpful. I thought among a lot of management books, this one in particular had a lot of concrete pieces of advice kind of along the way that was both kind of helpful for me at kind of the point I'm at to kind of see, okay, what should I be thinking about and what should I be expecting? But also, I was actually able to use it immediately when I had a tech lead come to me and ask me for advice on kind of how they get to the next level. So I don't know, I find it was a pretty good book for something I was able to take action on pretty quickly, both for myself and for my team.
Scully.
I tried to think of the quote that I've heard throughout my career that was the most valuable to me, and one that I think of a lot in my career was early on when I was first at Google. My manager, I'd gone to him with a problem, and we had this. We were on the precipice. This thing was either going to fail spectacularly or it was going to succeed. And his advice was, and I stole the spectacular, he said, if you're going to fail, fail spectacularly. So the idea was like, reach for big things, right? Like you want to actually put yourself in a position where you're not sure if you're going to succeed. Because if you only do the things you're sure you're going to succeed, then you're not going to go anywhere very fast. That's how I took it, at least. And so I feel like there's been multiple times throughout my career where I jumped into something or I said yes to something that I had no idea if it was going to actually work. But the idea is like, you want to fail on something that was worth having achieved in the first place. And so I think that can accelerate your growth or accelerate your confidence in trying new things.
Davis.
I have a quote that I like about leadership, and it's by Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher who lived a long time ago. And I don't have it memorized, so I'll just have to paraphrase for you. But he said something like, with a great leader, when the people accomplish something big, they don't even realize the leader was there. They say, we did it ourselves. And I think that speaks to autonomy and empowerment and that sort of supportive leadership versus directive.
Johnson.
I like that one. So when we were thinking about this question, I'm not one on quotes because I'm bad at memorization. But the thing that jumped out to me was actually a blog post that I read, and the title of that blog post is "Give Away Your Legos," and it's on a great blog, and it's a great article in and of itself with tons of great advice for you on scaling your startup. But one of the pieces that's tucked in there is "Give Away Your Legos," and in it she's talking about that as you move up the organization, you've got to be able to give away your role to others who can do it and do it well, so that you can grow with the organization, and that's the only way that you can continue to grow with the organization. Otherwise, you can kind of become stagnant or push off into a corner. And if you want to do something greater, give away those Legos and let each person build with those, and then combine it into something great. And there's tons of other great advice in there too, but that's the one that's always stuck with me.
Humphrey.
Thanks. Well, we've plugged Camille Fournier a lot today, but I'll say, like, I pulled a quote that I'll just read to you from The Manager's Path, and it's towards the end of the book. She writes, "Look for the other side of the story. Think about the other perspectives at play. Investigate your emotional reactions and observe when those reactions make it hard to see clearly what's going on around you, what needs to be said. Apply that curiosity to people. Apply it to process, apply it to technology, strategy, and business. Ask questions and be willing to have your notions proven wrong." I think that really ties a lot of the things we've talked about together really well. So thanks, Camille, for being brilliant. And thank you all for being here tonight. Stick around, grab another drink. We can hang out for another half hour or so. Thanks.